Welcome back to the Health C podcast. This is Luna here along with Logan. Hope everyone's doing well.
Great to be here.
Okay, so you're here for the deep dive because you want to get smart, fast, on the topics that really matter. No wading through endless articles, just the key stuff.
Exactly.
And today we're diving into something that's always causing debate, processed meats.
Yeah, it's a big one. Think of this as your guide, our mission, to really unpack the health concerns. We've got your note, the overview of processed meat health concerns, and that's going to be our roadmap.
Good, because it feels like, 1 minute it's terrible for you, the next it's a good source of protein. It's confusing.
It definitely can be.
So let's start with that general feeling. Most people hear processed meat, and it doesn't sound great, does it?
That's fair. The perception is generally cautious, and there's solid evidence behind that caution. But here's where it gets tricky. Processed meat isn't just one thing. It's a really broad category.
Okay, broad how? Like, my first thought is, hot dogs or maybe bologna, not exactly health foods.
Right, those are definitely in there. But let's think of it more like a spectrum. On one end,
Yeah.
you have things that are sometimes called natural or minimally processed.
Like deli meat, roast beef, turkey breast, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Things you might get sliced fresh.
Mm-hmm.
They often seem, well, less worrying.
Yeah.
And in some ways they are. Usually it's whole muscle meat. It's cooked, maybe seasoned. It will have salt, though, and sometimes natural nitrates, often from things like celery powder.
Okay, nitrates. We'll come back to that, I bet.
Definitely. But just on the salt, even there you see a difference. Freshly sliced deli turkey might have, say, 150 to maybe 700 milligrams of sodium for 3 ounces.
Which is still quite a bit.
It can be.
Yeah.
But compare that to the prepackaged version of the same turkey. That could easily jump to 700, even 1,000 milligrams.
Wow. Okay. That's a big jump just for being pre-sliced and packed.
It really is. So that's one end. Then you move towards the other end of the spectrum.
The stuff that gives processed meat its bad name.
Pretty much. This is where you find what we might call reconstituted or highly processed meats. Your hot dogs, sausages, that bologna you mentioned.
Right.
These are often made from something called mechanically separated meat, which it sounds kind of industrial, right?
Yeah, what is that exactly?
It's basically where meat scraps and tissue are forced through a sieve at high pressure to get every last bit off the bone. The resulting product is then reformed.
Okay. Doesn't sound too appetizing.
And these products tend to be very high in sodium, often over 1,000 milligrams per 100 grams. Plus, they have a longer list of additives, including those synthetic nitrates.
And I heard something about nitrosamines, especially with hot dogs.
Yes, that's a concern. During processing or even cooking at high heat, the nitrites can combine with amines naturally present in meat to form nitrosamines, and those are known carcinogens.
Got it. Okay, so that distinction is really important. Now, what about the labels? I see cured and uncured all the time. Uncured sounds healthier, doesn't it?
It absolutely sounds healthier, and that's sort of the point of the labeling, I think, but it's a bit misleading.
How so?
Both cured and uncured meats generally use nitrates or nitrites to preserve them and add flavor and color. Cured typically uses synthetic versions. Uncured uses natural sources, like that celery powder or beet juice we mentioned. But here's the kicker. Your body converts nitrates from either source into nitrites. And Consumer Reports actually tested this.
And what did they find?
They found pretty similar levels of nitrates and nitrites in both cured and uncured products. So the idea that uncured is automatically way better, the evidence doesn't really support that.
Huh. That's really good to know. It feels like marketing almost.
It can definitely feel that way. It plays on that desire for a natural choice.
Okay, one more distinction. Red meat versus white meat when it's processed, does that matter? Like, is processed turkey different from processed salami?
It does have some implications, yeah. Processed red meats, like salami or beef hot dogs, contain heme iron.
Heme iron, that's the type found in animal products.
Right. And some research links higher intake of heme iron to issues in the colon, potentially increasing cancer risk.
Okay.
Processed white meats, like turkey or chicken slices, have less heme iron, but they can still be packed with sodium and those preservatives.
So not necessarily off the hook.
Exactly. And another challenge is that a lot of the big studies looking at processed meat and health risks didn't always clearly separate red versus white processed meat. They often group them together.
So it makes it harder to pinpoint the specific risks for each type.
Precisely. But understanding these categories, minimally processed versus highly processed, cured versus uncured, red versus white, it helps get a more nuanced picture of the potential health impacts. It's not all the same.
Right, that makes sense. Now let's shift gears a bit. We hear all these warnings, but surely the meat industry pushes back, right? They must have their own studies saying this stuff is fine.
They definitely respond, yes.
Mm.
Industry groups like the National Cattlemen's Beef Association or the North American Meat Institute, they do fund research.
Okay, and what does that research typically show? Or maybe what does it focus on?
Well, it often highlights the positive nutritional aspects, protein, vitamins like B12, minerals like iron and zinc,
Yeah.
even in processed forms.
So focusing on the good stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another big focus is on reformulation, finding ways to make processed meats seem healthier, reducing sodium, lowering fat, finding alternatives to synthetic nitrates.
Seems logical, but you have to be a bit skeptical, right, if the industry is funding it.
That's the natural reaction, yeah.
Yeah.
There's always the question of potential bias when the funder has a vested interest in the outcome.
So are they putting out studies that directly say, hey, the WHO was wrong, processed meat doesn't cause cancer?
Not really, no. You don't see many direct refutations of major findings like the 2015 WHO classification. It's more subtle.
How so?
The strategy seems more focused on emphasizing moderation, balancing the risks against the nutritional benefits, promoting those reformulated healthier options, and maybe using PR to kind of downplay the risks.
So managing the message rather than disproving the science.
That seems to be a fair assessment. It's notable that finding robust, peer-reviewed, industry-funded studies that directly contradict the large body of independent research showing negative health outcomes. Well, that's quite difficult.
Interesting. Okay, so your note mentioned 3 most robust, industry-supported studies from roughly the last 5 years. What did they actually find? Did they challenge the health concerns?
Right, we looked for recent examples, and robust here is relative, they're peer-reviewed, but look closely at what they studied. The first one is from 2017 by Shan et al., a bit outside the 5-year window, but relevant to the trend.
Okay, what was it about?
It looked at consumer reactions in Ireland to reformulated processed meats things with less salt, less fat, maybe added omega-3s. It was supported by the Irish meat industry.
Did people like them? Did it say they were healthier?
It used something called conjoint analysis, basically figuring out what features people value. It found that these reformulations could make people perceive the products as healthier.
Perceive. Okay, keyword there.
Exactly. It's about consumer perception, not actual health outcomes. It shows the industry might be having some success in making products look better, but it doesn't say they are fundamentally safer.
Got it. What's the second study?
This one's from 2024, Luna and colleagues. It was a review looking at opportunities to reformulate cured meats in Ireland again, focusing on reducing sodium, fat, and nitrates while keeping them palatable.
Funded by?
Partly by food research bodies with industry ties. It's a solid review, peer-reviewed, showing the technical possibilities for making changes.
But again, does it say these changed products are now risk-free or healthy?
Nope. It supports the idea that the industry can reformulate, fitting that narrative of we're making improvements. But it doesn't challenge the underlying health concerns identified by independent research.
Okay, and the third one?
Also 2024, Selgalgar and Nolden. This used that same conjoint analysis method to look at consumer preferences for hybrid hot dogs.
Hybrid, like meat and plant-based mixed together.
Exactly. This reflects the industry's interest in tapping into the plant-based trend and offering alternatives that might appeal to health-conscious consumers.
So finding out if people would actually buy these things.
Precisely. It's about market trends and consumer acceptance of new product types. Again, peer-reviewed, interesting from a market perspective, but it tells us nothing about the actual health impact compared to traditional processed meats.
Right. So looking at these 3 examples, the critical note in your overview seems spot on. This research is way more about reformulation, perception, and market trends than it is about directly refuting the known health risks.
That's the clear pattern. It seems strategically focused on areas that present the industry in a more positive or innovative light, rather than funding studies that might confirm the negative findings from independent science.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's bring it back to the consumer. Even if we stick to the better end of the spectrum, that deli roast beef or turkey you mentioned, there are still concerns. Let's unpack those.
Absolutely. Even with minimally processed options, the anti-processed meat narrative still holds some water. The first big issue is sodium.
We touched on that huge jump in prepackaged stuff.
Right. Even fresh sliced can be high. We're talking 500, 600, 700 milligrams of sodium per ounce sometimes for deli turkey.
Per ounce, wow. A few ounces on a sandwich and...
Exactly. You could easily blow past half your recommended daily sodium limit, especially if you're aiming for the ideal target of 1,500 milligrams set by the American Heart Association. And high sodium intake is directly linked to hypertension and heart disease.
Okay, so sodium is a big one. What about the nitrates in the natural or uncured versions? You said the body still converts them.
Correct. That natural source, like celery juice, provides nitrates. Your saliva and gut bacteria convert those nitrates into nitrites. And those nitrites, especially in the presence of proteins in high heat, can form nitrosamines.
Which are the carcinogenic compounds.
Yes. So the no nitrates or nitrites added label, except for those naturally occurring in celery powder, doesn't mean you're avoiding the potential formation of nitrosamines. It's quite misleading for consumers.
It really is. And then there's the overall cancer link. The WHO classification wasn't just for hot dogs, was it?
Yeah, it's crucial. The WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies all processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen, carcinogenic to humans. That includes deli meats.
Based on what evidence?
Based on sufficient evidence linking processed meat consumption to colorectal cancer. The often cited statistic is that consuming just 50 grams of processed meat daily, that's less than 2 slices of bacon, maybe a couple of slices of deli ham, increases the risk of colorectal cancer by 18%.
18%. That's significant. So even the minimally processed stuff carries that classification.
It does. The risk might be dose-dependent, meaning less frequent consumption likely carries less risk than daily consumption, and perhaps the risk is lower than for highly processed types. But the classification applies across the board.
Any other concerns with deli meats?
Saturated fat can still be a factor depending on the cut. While turkey breast is lean, roast beef or some hams can contribute saturated fat. And think about how they're often eaten with cheese, mayonnaise on white bread. It all adds up.
Good point. It's rarely eaten in isolation.
And health organizations consistently echo these concerns. MD Anderson Cancer Center explicitly states all processed meats increase cancer risk due to preservatives and sodium, even the natural ones.
Uh-huh.
EatingWell points out the massive sodium difference compared to fresh meat and highlights the heart disease and cancer links, advising moderation. Cleveland Clinic suggests fresh sliced is maybe slightly better than prepackaged, but still has the nitrate and sodium issues, often recommending alternatives.
So the consensus, even for the better options, is still pretty cautious.
Definitely. The critical perspective is that while the level of risk might vary across the spectrum, the fundamental concerns about sodium and the potential for nitrosamine formation from nitrate-side nitrites remain even for minimally processed meats. And those natural labels don't negate these issues.
Okay, this has been super helpful for cutting through the noise. Let's try to summarize the key takeaways for everyone listening.
Sure. I think the first big thing is understanding that processed meat isn't monolithic. There's a real spectrum, from minimally processed deli slices to highly processed hot dogs, and the risks likely vary.
Right. And second, the industry's response to health concerns often focuses on reformulation and perception-making products seem better, rather than directly refuting the core scientific links to health issues like cancer and heart disease.
Exactly. Their funded research often looks at consumer attitudes or technical fixes, not long-term health outcomes.
And third, even those minimally processed options, like deli turkey or roast beef, aren't without concerns. High sodium is a major one, and the natural nitrates from sources like celery juice still lead to nitrate formation and potential nitrosamine risks. The WHO classification applies to all of them.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Which leads to the final big warning. Don't be fooled by labels like natural or uncured or nitrite-free. They don't automatically mean it's a truly healthy choice. You still need to consider the sodium and the source of those preservatives.
Absolutely. Reading the nutrition facts panel and the ingredient list is still key.
So, a final thought for you to mull over. Think about the processed meats you eat. How often? What types? Now that you have this deeper understanding, how might that influence your choices going forward? Maybe it's about frequency, or maybe switching types, or exploring other options altogether.
Yeah, it's about making informed choices that align with your own health goals, armed with a clearer picture of what's actually in these products and what the science says. It encourages that critical look at labels and marketing.
Thanks again, everybody, for listening in. Stay healthy and see you next time.